to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. My special guest is Daniel McAdams. He's the executive director of the Ron Paul Institute. Welcome, Daniel. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Sabrina. I'm really happy to be with you.
So I think, we have been talking about Gaza for quite some time, even before October 7th. The first year I started the show in October 2021, we were talking about one of the attacks back then. And I have to say, I'm somewhat hopeful that because of October 7th, that more people are starting to pay attention to the financial involvement with these wars. More people are calling out the lobbies. They're calling out AIPAC, right? They're calling out Kufi, all of these lobbies that support these efforts, these war efforts that are happening to protect the state of Israel. Currently, we are seeing that Donald Trump is trying to primary Thomas Massie. Thomas Massie does not take money from AIPAC and is very much anti-war. So we're seeing this on all fronts, and I think it's just more out in the open now. I want to talk a little bit about that, about the Israel lobbies and their influence in Congress and even some of these presidential elections. Is this the reason why we are having a lot of these wars in the Middle East? And is that the sole reason?
It's a large reason. And, certainly the power of the Israel lobby is strong. As you point out now, the last thing they want is to have light shined upon them. And that's what's happening now. And sadly, it's occurring literally in the blood of the Gazan people who are being slaughtered. But people are starting to recognize, hey, hang on a minute, why are we doing this? Why do my politicians, for example, as Marjorie Taylor Greene said, we've had 23 bills condemning anti-Semitism, but we can't seem to get the appropriations bills done. And Americans are starting to scratch their head. And there have been several polls this year, most recently a Pew poll just last month, showing that a majority, 52% of Americans, do not have a favorable view of Israel. A Gallup poll, I think in late May, showed that a majority of even Republicans, if you look at Republicans from the ages of 17 to 35, a majority of Republican voters do not have a favorable view of Israel. So there's a massive disconnect between a U.S. Congress in both houses, where probably 99% of them are absolutely in the tank for Israel, and an American public that's waking up and saying, I don't get this. Why are we doing this? We don't do this with any other country. What's going on here?
That's right. And how do we break away from that? Like, how do we is the solution to elect more politicians that are not going to take money from AIPAC? Or is the solution, does it have to be on a grander scale? Like, how do we get away from these lobby interest groups?
Well, I'll tell you one thing, it's going to get uglier before it gets better. And we see the iron fist inside the velvet glove of the Israel lobby. And we see it, you mentioned Thomas Massie, for example. Now, people would have you believe that Thomas Massie is a raving anti-Semite who wants Israel erased off the face of the earth, whereas the reality is his position is the same as was Dr. Paul's and many others, which is, I don't want to single Israel out for anything, but I don't support foreign aid at all. It's taking money from poor people in the U.S. and giving it to rich people overseas, and that's just not going to work. So the idea that Americans are supporting this is decreasing, but I think they're going to get more vicious. Now, we see the attacks on speech in the United States. First, they're coming for foreign students because that's the low-hanging fruit. Oh, you wrote an editorial in your school newspaper 3 years ago saying that, gosh, maybe we shouldn't be supporting killing a lot of civilians. Well, you got to go home. Thankfully, this young woman was successful, as was the young man who was arrested. But that's just the opening. That's the opening round, and it's going to get worse and worse for Americans. So it's a big danger. They have a lot of power. You mentioned presidential elections. We know that that Ailson's widow gave 100 million, 200 million. It's just funny money at that point to President Donald Trump, and they want their return on their investment. And so that's why you're seeing things now that are clearly not in our interest being done to satisfy the interest of the big money people.
Did Ron Paul, did he face these same type of attacks that like Thomas Massey is facing right now?
Yes, he did, but I think it's worse now with Massey for the reasons that I'm saying, which is that more people are noticing that this is a problem. That the why do you think they're banning? You know, they want to ban TikTok. They want to sell it. They'll probably sell it to Miriam Adelson, right? you know, they're trying to ban. Back when Dr. Paul was in office, he was actually the first person, the first member of Congress that I remember, maybe the only member of Congress who said in a live interview, this was many years ago, that Gaza is an open air concentration camp, and he was tarred for that. But I think it's more vicious now. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing it happen all around. The big question I think a lot of people have is how do we stop these wars, in particular in the Middle East? Like, how do we stop it? I just saw a report earlier today that Donald Trump is not sending weapons to Ukraine. And I see people cheering as though this means he's trying to stop the war. But I would caution people because he is sending more weapons to Israel. And I think that's why they stopped shipment to Ukraine, at least for now. But these wars, particular in the Middle East, I've heard about wars in the Middle East my whole life. And it wasn't until I would say a couple years ago, I started to realize Israel was a big driving factor, a big cause of a lot of the turmoil in the Middle East. And a lot of us that remember September 11, we were taught that it was the Arab countries that were evil, right? We were taught that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, and that's why we're going to this war. Obviously, we learned later on that the war in Iraq was a big lie, and a lot of people lost their lives. And I think more people also woke up from after that. But in regards to the Middle East, it seems like as long as Israel, and some people disagree with me on this, but it just seems like Israel does not want to live peacefully with those other countries. It feels like, according to Netanyahu in this greater Israel plan, that is what they want to do. They want to expand the state of Israel. They want to take Gaza. They want to take the West Bank. According to that map, that includes parts of Saudi Arabia, Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan. And to me, it seems like the big problem is Israel. Is there any hope that when we talk about ending these wars, is there any hope that the United States at some point can cut away from Israel?
Well, there's a lot to unpack in that excellent question. Don't forget also part of Egypt. They want a big chunk of that as well.
Great.
The problem with Israel is, say you've got kind of a smart mouth on you and you like to go to bars and mouth off to people, but you also happen to have a massive friend who every time you get yourself in trouble with your mouth, he stands next to you and bops someone on the head who's attempting to get back at you. That's our toxic relationship with Israel. Israel feels that it can do whatever it wants because regardless of what it does, regardless of how many countries, I don't know if I can use the word piss off, however many countries they irritate, maybe I'll say that, sorry, the U.S. will always have its back. It's like a kid who you never punish. And that's the problem. So we're not doing them any favors by constantly backing them up. On the contrary, we're encouraging them to engage in these kind of self-destructive behaviors. You see the entire world now aligned against Israel. If you look at public opinion, that Pew poll I mentioned also surveyed the attitudes of people in about 24 countries. Every single country, with the strange exception of Nigeria, I can't figure that out, every single country, the majority or the vast majority, have negative views of Israel. So if you like Israel, you shouldn't like what's happening because it doesn't help them in the slightest. So I think the question that you started with is how do we bring these wars for Israel to an end? And that's actually one of the reasons I bothered you on X. I don't usually do that, but one of the reasons I think that ways we can do that is to establish a broad, beyond left-right coalition. That's the founding principles of the Ron Paul Institute. A lot of people think that we're a libertarian organization. We're not. It was founded on the principles, actually after the 2008 election, where Dr. Paul brought together the candidates of the minor parties, and it would be Chuck Baldwin, Cynthia McKinney, Bob Barr, and a few of the others, to agree on some basic things. Even though our ideologies are different, we agree that we shouldn't give money to rich countries overseas. We should audit the Fed. We should deal with the Federal Reserve, and a few other things. So that's the idea. We have to stop. This is exactly what the War Party wants us to fight over things that we're not going to agree on. One of the things we have to do is put those aside for now and focus on the most important things, which is the war machine that's destroying our economy. And you point out, you're rightly skeptical and maybe even cynical about the cessation of missile shipments to Ukraine. Partly, yes, it is because Israel is almost out because they fired them off because they started a war that they knew they couldn't end. But the other thing is, we're running out of missiles. We don't have any. You know, the THAAD missile cost $13 million each. For every Iranian missile that went toward Israel, they had to shoot at least two. And the Iranian missiles are what, $20,000-$50,000 each. We're burning up 32,000, whatever the math is, $23 million for every launch. And that money is not being paid by Israel, it's being paid by Sabrina and Daniel and everyone else around here. We're the ones that put the bill for it.
So, see, this is a really good point. I remember about a couple years ago, there was a rally called the Rage Against the War Machine rally. I went to DC to cover that. And there was, some people were really like doubtful or hesitant about it. But when I was at that rally, there were people from different political ideologies at that point in time. And it did seem like the one thing everybody had in common was, okay, we got to end these wars. People may not remember this, but Tulsi Gabbard spoke at that rally. And, and that's why, and I see how she pivoted, once she got into Trump's administration. But I think that the anti-war movement in this country is getting bigger. I don't know if it's at the point to where it was during the Vietnam War, but I think it is growing and it is getting bigger. And I was a little, I guess, disappointed after October 7th when I saw that some of the same people like Tulsi Gabbard who spoke at that rally, all of a sudden it was because it was Israel they were advocating for the U.S. give them everything that we can to help Israel. And I'm like, you just spoke at an anti-war rally like not too long ago. So what are you talking about? And that I think is what kind of woke me up. I'm like, okay, now that it's Israel, some people are going to make the excuse for we need to have this war because it's Israel. Even some of the ones that were anti-war. And I think that was my big concern, because if you're speaking to some of the conservatives, some of the ones that did support Donald Trump, I am seeing more of them, especially podcasters, that are speaking out and saying, no, this isn't right. Like whether it's Candace Owens, Dave Smith, et cetera, or Dave Smith, actually libertarian, but you get my point. They're speaking out against it. My worry, though, is that it seems like the majority are not and are advocating for it because of biblical said prophecy, or because Donald Trump is supporting this or whatever. So I think that is my fear. I've been trying to wake people up that, like, I grew up in the church. The Israel that's mentioned in the Bible is not the modern day Israel of today. So I've been trying to educate people about that. But how do you get to the evangelical Christians, for example, that still say, well, this has to happen because it's biblical?
Yeah, it's a tiny minority. That's the positive part. By the way, I spoke at both of the Rage Against the War Machine rallies, and I can't. You probably were in the media tent. It was such a blast to be sitting there. It's me over there. You see Ron Paul, Chris Hayes, Tulsi Gabbard, Dennis Kucinich, who's on our board, by the way. All of these guys hanging out and comparing notes. It's really fascinating. The energy was incredible in that room, in the green room there. the question, one of the problems that we face, so going back to the Iraq War, when I was working on Capitol Hill for Dr. Paul, we had assembled a great anti-war coalition. A lot of Democrats. We worked very closely with Barbara Lee, many others, and a lot of Republicans. And they would go down. They would put up resolutions. It was great. It was a great anti-war movement. As soon as Barack Obama was elected, all of the Democrats went dark. They didn't return our emails, didn't get back in touch because he's their guy. Likewise, with a lot of Trump people now who are with us, he's their guy. I just have to explain it to you. No, Trump is really anti-war. It's just that, And so we got to get over the sort of the no kings kind of thing. We got to get over this. We got to get rid of our idols here. None of these guys are saints. You may like some things about them, but don't be so clingy to your guy that you're going to miss the whole point of the operation. So that's a tricky thing to do.
I think that's well said there. I think a lot of people have like the hero worship, and they don't know how to let that go. Now, there was a news story that just broke that I think is really important. I want to go ahead and share this as well here. This story that just came out: lucrative business deals help sustain Israel's campaign in Gaza. This is according to the UN report. I just want to scroll down here for a second. This just goes to show people that a lot of money is involved here. It is Italian human rights lawyer Francesca Albanese, UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territory. She compiled the report based on more than 200 submissions from states, human rights defenders, companies, and academics. The report, published late on Monday, calls for companies to cease dealings with Israel and for legal accountability for executives implicated in the alleged violations of international law. And what it is saying here is that more than 60 companies, including major arms manufacturers and technology firms, in a report alleging their involvement in supporting Israeli settlements and military actions in Gaza. So Francesca is pointing out the companies here. And I think I want people to see this for technology giants, Alphabet, Amazon, Microsoft, and IBM were named as central to Israel's surveillance apparatus and the ongoing Gaza destruction. So, of course, also they mentioned Palantir Technologies, which we have covered on this show before. But I think this is a big deal because now people are starting to see that there were business deals that were attached to this as well. And I want to get your take on that.
Yeah, and what this really is, Sabrina, this is welfare for the wealthy, because Israel is not paying Palantir, Israel is not paying Amazon. It's our money. It's the Americans who are taxed and robbed to pay for it, to pay for Israel. This is U.S. aid to Israel that pays for this. This is the unholy alliance between the so-called private sector and the government. And they collude with each other to the benefit, so to speak, of Israel. But we are the real losers. I think a lot of people don't understand that Israel is a wealthy country. Israel, GDP per capita is higher than Japan. This is a country that can take care of itself. If it would stop picking fights with people, then it would be in much better shape. But we're stealing from working people in America who are getting clobbered by inflation and a number of other things. We're stealing from these people to give to a rich country, Israel, so that it can start wars and then suck America into its wars, spend more money, and get Americans killed. It's a very sick and toxic situation. And I think when working in middle-class America wakes up to what's happening, what's being stolen from them to this benefit, that's when I think we'll start getting some kind of critical mass.
And I think that's the message that we really need to land with people is for people to understand all the money that's spent for war, all the money that's spent for the defense budget, which continues to increase over the years. This is money that could be spent right here at home. And so it's always really frustrating to me when I feel like people, and I think people just don't have time, like people don't connect the dots there. When it seems like to me, whenever you ask for something domestically and it costs money, the question is, how are you going to pay for it? But we have wars all over the world and nobody asks, how are you going to pay for it? It just seems like it's just a given, just push money that way. And I want people to start asking that question, like, where are you getting all this money to pay for like these wars? Where are you getting all this money to put into the defense budget? Where is that coming from? So I think that people have to get, to your point, outside of their political ideologies in order to hear different perspectives. And that's another thing I wanted to ask you about. Both parties are pro-war. You know, the Democratic Party, I feel like a long time ago didn't used to be, but at this, both parties are pro-war. And I think like people really need an anti-war party. Now, people point towards the Green Party, but I know that's not for everybody. Like some people may agree with the anti-war issue, but maybe not the other issues, right? So I feel like if there ever was a time for people to move towards a third party or start supporting like independent candidates, I feel like now is that time. What do you feel? What do you feel is the likelihood of that happening? Of more people, let's say by the time we get around to 2028 election, more people choosing to vote third party or independent because of this reason alone.
Yeah, I think it could go that way. The problem is that it feels so daunting. You know, here we are, you and I mean, there are millions of people like us, but the people who really control the power, they have so much power and so much wealth. You know, there's a huge disconnect if you think about it. We have the largest military budget in the world. The next 7 countries below us combined spend less on military than we do. Yet we are stopping our shipments of missiles to Ukraine because we are running out of missiles. So if we're spending this trillion and a half dollars every year and we actually don't have any weapons, then what the heck? Where's the money going? Who's getting all this money? It's not defending us. It's not defending anyone. And that's the big scam. And, you know, people will knife you for $20. Imagine what they'll do to protect their fiefdoms, their billion-dollar kingdoms. So it's very, very dangerous, you know, to try to go up against them. But in terms of anti-war candidates, I think it's difficult. It's difficult to start a third party. You know, the Libertarian Party is around, but they've got their own problems. I remember back in 2000, the Reform Party with Pat Buchanan. He ran on a strictly anti-war position, and he attracted a lot of even progressive support. But it's very difficult. Americans don't really understand because we never face the consequences of the wars that we support. We're not living in Gaza. We're not running around. Even the poorest in America are not living like those people there. So we never see the effects of it. We don't see what's happened in Libya that was destroyed by the U.S. in the service of Israel, by the way. And the same is true with Syria, destroyed by the U.S. in the service of Israel. Now they're being headed by Al Qaeda again. I mean, you know, it's unfortunate that we don't see this, that we don't connect the dots. I think elections are important, but I think what you do is more important because we have to educate people and make them start asking questions. When they start asking questions, they're going to seek answers.
What is the likelihood of? I feel like Benjamin Netanyahu is also continuing war so that he can stay in power. But if Benjamin Netanyahu were to resign or let's say lose election, um, I feel like this saga still continues because I do worry when I hear politicians say this is all because of Benjamin Netanyahu, because I feel like if he is replaced, you're still going to have some of these same issues because Israel does want to expand and they don't want the Palestinian people there. But if Benjamin Netanyahu, let's say he were to resign this year or next year, or for whatever reason, they vote him out, which from what I understand from his last vote, it was very close. Um, what do you think that what happens there? What do you think people in Israel, what do they learn from this?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, there are quite a few progressives in the U.S. who like to do that. It's kind of convenient. They can say, well, it's just that right-wing Netanyahu. And it's okay that they're criticizing it, but I agree with you. They're missing the point. And if you look at internal polls in Israel, vast majority, I think in the I think I saw someone 82%. They believe that Gaza should be ethnically cleansed. They believe that Palestinians should be completely kicked off the territory. So it's you're right. It's much deeper than simply one crazed politician. Unfortunately, Israeli society is brainwashed. They've been brainwashed from a very young age. And it's strange because it's kind of a suicidal brainwashing. You can't continue to stomp around killing people all around you and expect to have a future as a country. But as of right now, they are brainwashed, and I don't know how to fix that. I don't know how that can be fixed. Maybe it has to run its course. Who knows? But that is a real problem. It's not just Netanyahu, it's Israeli society. There's something that's very sick right now in Israeli society.
I totally hear you. What would you say to the opportunity of having another like anti-war event or anti-war rally for 2025, 2026 for next year, and maybe a blend of, I don't know, like Green Party speakers, like just a blend of, just anti-war speakers. What would you say to that? Do you think that would be a good? I think it needs to be something other than Rage Against the Machine. I think it needs to be Rage Against the War Machine. I think it needs to be something else. Just because, I think, again, some of the speakers totally changed their tune when Donald Trump became president. But would you be open to doing something like that again?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I would love to help organizing it. I mean, I think it's absolutely what's needed. When you see that that's one of the reasons, one of the main things the Ron Paul Institute does is hold conferences. And the people who come to our conferences are incredibly diverse, politically, in every way, shape, or form. It's important to bring people together because one of the biggest weapons they have against us is us feeling like, well, I'm all alone. I guess no one else thinks the way I do. Well, it turns out a lot of people think the way we do. And if we could put together something like this and especially promote it properly. My beef against those two rallies was that they weren't properly promoted, and so there wasn't enough people there. But if you do something like that, I mean, I was in the original Iraq War protests in 2002. We had 1 million people in D.C. saying don't go to war. And yeah, we didn't win, but we started a hell of a movement, and it can be done again, I think. But we have to keep in mind what you're saying. Broad coalition, as broad as possible. Don't fight over things that are not important. Just focus on this. I think it's a fantastic idea, and I'd love to be involved in it.
Awesome. Daniel, thank you so much for your time. Can you let everybody know where they can find your work?
Sure. We're at ronpaulinstitute.org. Dr. Paul and I do a daily Ron Paul Liberty Report. We often talk about foreign policy. That's Monday through Friday at noon Eastern time, live on Rumble for now. So we'd love to have people tune in. We do have a conference coming up at Dulles, Virginia on August 16th. We would love to have as many people as possible there to show the strength. We have some great speakers that are going to be there as well. So look forward to seeing all of your listeners and viewers as well, Sabrina.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.